Tell me what you think I need to know, what you are interested in hearing from me, because I'd rather you direct where this conversation goes.
Okay, right up front, the youth vote.
In the 2016 Michigan primary, Senator Sanders won in a surprise upset. That fall, Trump won with a slim margin. We don't need to rehash last year, but instead look forward. My question, Ms. Whitmer, how are you and your team looking to claim victory in this new political landscape? How do you expect to cut down allegations of being establishment and to truly build a diverse coalition of voters?
Thank you, Sam, for the question, and thank you for volunteering with my petitions back there. He's biased. I'm just gonna tell you right now. No, I appreciate the question, Sam. I think it's an important one. As we think about what happened in the last election, I always think it's really important that we remember that Donald Trump won Michigan with fewer votes than George W. Bush lost Michigan to John Kerry.
Yeah.
So it's not like all of a sudden Michigan went from being Barack Obama supporters to Donald Trump enthusiasts. It's that people didn't turn out and vote. That's who decided this election, were the people that did not turn out and vote. And I think that speaks to a couple of things. Number one, how important it is that we have a real grassroots ground game. That we turn out vote, we register voters, we identify voters, and we turn them out and get them to the polls. But it's also how important it is that we've given them something to vote for. Yeah. It seems like in this last presidential, as qualified as Clinton was and as many white papers as she had on every issue there was, that the end of the campaign was focused on why people shouldn't vote for Donald Trump as opposed to why people should vote for Clinton. And I think, frankly, we could make that observation about the last two governor's races too. So I think it's really important that we have an aspirational message, that we talk about the Michigan that we deserve, the Michigan that our kids want to stay in, can afford to stay in, have opportunities to stay in. The Michigan where people are respected no matter what walk of life you are, and you've got rights and you can enjoy the water in Michigan that defines us. I think that these are things that we really have to get a lot better talking about, but putting forth an aspirational message. Now, on the question of establishment, I tell you, for 14 years in the legislature, I was the minority leader on everything, even within debates in my own party at times. I took on a Democratic governor when she wanted to start taking money out of the school aid fund to shore up the general fund, because I was afraid that that would be used as the blueprint for continuing theft from the school aid fund, and sure enough, it was. So I've never been afraid to take on the leaders, even within my own party, when I think they're wrong. But if by establishment, the question means, and I know you don't mean this, but I know that this is a conversation that's happening out there, you don't have to choose between someone who's progressive and has experience. In fact, now more than ever, that is absolutely essential for making sure that the things we care about become a reality. I served with 3 different governors during my time in the legislature. There was one who was better able to get an agenda accomplished than the other 2, and it was John Engler. Now, please don't hear me to be saying that I liked his agenda, because I did not. I voted against it 99 out of 100 times. But I'll tell you this, understanding the legislature is absolutely essential to getting things done in Lansing. And Governor Snyder has been paralyzed by a supermajority of his own party because he doesn't understand how to get things done in Lansing. Governor Granholm worked her tail off and had all the right values, but never served as a legislator, and I think that really hampered her ability to get things done, and even to get votes on the Democratic side of the aisle on certain issues. So I think right now, more than ever, that experience and progressive is exactly the combination that we need to get this state back on track and to make it a reality. Because we're all progressive, but we gotta know how to go in there and get things done. So if that's what is meant by establishment, okay, I'm okay with it.
So I think that all the gubernatorial candidates are doing a good job of talking about the Flint water crisis, but I think what the conversation lacks is then what the health crisis is going to come from Flint. So like, even if we don't get Medicare for all or single-payer health care, how do you plan on supporting Flint to make sure that people who are affected by the lead in their system can deal with the health crisis and the health issues we're going to have to deal with after Flint and their water gets fixed?
Right. So a couple things about Flint, all right? First of all, I think Flint is an example of the worst failure of government on every single level. It's also an example of how when you get someone who's pinching pennies and not worried about protecting people, how dangerous that can be. I wonder sometimes if that would happen on any other governor's watch that we've had in recent history, and it's hard to imagine, even on any of the Republicans who have served. As soon as General Motors stopped using the water because it was corroding their engine blocks, every red flag in the world should have. And I think it's just important to touch on the EM law. We opposed the EM law when it was on the floor of the Senate, and I was the one on the front line talking about my fears about what it would mean. Unchecked, undemocratic bean counters going into communities and making decisions. I never could have imagined it would be as horrifying as the reality that we're now looking at. The people weighed in, we by referendum defeated that law, and then the Republicans used a gimmick of putting in some money into a new emergency manager law so that it would circumvent the people's right of referendum. And so I'm telling you right now, I will fight to make sure that we outlaw that practice. And as Governor, but all of that being said, right now we have a crisis that we still have to deal with. I watched the governor's State of the State in January, where he spent a lot more time bragging about the heft of the rainy day fund than he did talking about what's going on in Flint. People have been without water for over 3 years now. I was talking to a family, and now their water test 0 for lead, but they've got 300 times the amount of chlorine that they had before, so they can't bathe their kids and they can't drink the water, so they still have to require bottled water, even though under the lead and copper rule, the water's just fine. And so we have not solved the problems in Flint. And a lot of people are going to deal with lifetime consequences from the failure of government. And that's why I think it's incumbent on us to create a restricted fund for the long-term support of people that the government poisoned. And the only way to do that is through a restricted fund. These guys right now in Lansing like to talk about that they've fixed the roads. No, we know that's not true. But they pretended that they've obligated future legislatures to continue to withdraw money from the general fund and write checks to the roads. And that's never going to happen. And that's why it's so important that we create a restricted fund for this purpose, so that no term-limited legislature can come in and try to change the rules, because the people of Flint have to have assurances that when they have nutritional and medical and behavioral and all sorts of needs that are going to continue on over their lifetime, that they can get the help they need.
I'm going to go to the back real quick.
Gretchen, can I interrupt you really quickly? You
Sure.
talk about chlorine in the water. I don't understand what that's from. Where did that come from?
Well, because the water, they had to treat the water because there are so many microorganisms that were in it.
Legionnaires' problem?
The Legionnaires' problem. Thank you.
So
Exactly.
they flushing it with all this chlorine, but that shouldn't last.
Right, that should come.
They have, so this woman and daughter that I talked to, they were showing me the paperwork about that documented all the skin burns that their daughter had from the chlorine in the water. Yeah, and then I saw paperwork from another woman from the DEQ, so the State Department, that said that well, we want them to be better. Okay, but that said that she still had over 5,000 parts per billion, and that her blood level was 38.4, and 10 is toxic.
This will call that Clorox.
There's so little information about what's going on.
I know.
I live in the woods. I'm sorry. I don't get a lot of
Your remarks are revelatory, but why is this the first time we've heard of these meetings?
People have
From the Democratic Party.
I've been there. It's 3 weeks ago I was there.
The people of Flint feel forgotten. They like to be able to say that Yeah, there's no lead in some of the water, and they're making progress, but they haven't replaced all the water heaters that have been irreversibly damaged that still need to be replaced. So even if all the pipes are replaced and the water tests 0 for lead, it's still leaching out of these old water heaters that have been damaged. I mean, the problem is so much bigger and so much worse than I think any of us has a real understanding for. And that's why it's important to be on the ground. It's important to be in communities and talk to people. One of the things that was most mind-boggling for me is watching the governor sign the bill that that appropriated money to help the people of Flint. He signed it in Grand Rapids. Honestly. You know, and then you see the Attorney General come in with his legal team, and I don't know how many of them have spent any time in Flint talking to people and seeing what the real problem is. They vowed they would drink Flint water for 30 days, and then he went to Europe and couldn't make good on the promise. You know, I mean, there's such a huge disconnect between what's really happening for the families of Flint and what the rest of the world
You would
thinks is
never
going
have an
on.
emergency manager if you became.
Listen, we've always had an emergency manager law in Michigan, but what the Republicans did was they made it the emergency management law on steroids and gave them all this authority to undo democratically elected leadership that is totally disconnected from the people that they serve and driven only by trying to save money. And that's a problem. It doesn't work. And that's why we don't just need to elect a governor who's not going to utilize that law, but we change the law so that no future governor can undo the will of the people. Sorry, you lost control. We went crazy here.
That's okay. I guess I want to ask you about tax policy. And to fix Flint, to support and fix public schools, to fix our infrastructure, it's going to take money, and it's going to take a lot of money. Now, I personally believe there's a lot of money out there. So how are you looking to get that money, okay, through tax policy and to support these vital parts of our civilization?
That's a great question, and it's an important question. And here's what I know. When I was the Senate Democratic leader, I remember the governor's first budget, Governor Snyder's first budget. And his first budget gave business a massive tax break in Michigan. And he paid for it by taxing pensions, by trying to eliminate the earned income tax credit, and by cutting aid to schools.
And the false promises.
And I mean, everyone's participating. I love it. And with false promises. But that's how he paid for it. And what I know is that a budget is a statement of your values. More than any lines on a balance sheet. It's a statement of your values as a state. I remember vividly from that same budget year, a superintendent wrote to Governor Snyder and said, "Will you please declare my school district a prison?" Because we spend $40,000 a year to incarcerate someone and $8,000 a year to educate a child in Michigan. That there are some things that we could change that would redirect our priorities. But here's the thing. We have to invest in ourselves if we ever expect the rest of the world to want to invest in Michigan too. Yeah. We have to have the fundamentals met. We've got to have an education system that gets our kids where they need to be. We got to get back to a state that has a great, highly skilled population where we used to be, as opposed to where we are right now, because we are not competitive on that front. And it's no fault of our people. It's because our leaders have absolutely disinvested from the things that put us in the lead in the first place. You know, there was a point in time where if you went to one of our universities, the state picked up 75% of your tuition, and it was on the individual to take out loans or to work their way through, or their parents to pay 25% of the cost of getting educated, because we recognized that when there's a greater concentration of talent, we all benefit. But for years, that's changed, and now it's exactly the opposite, where it's 75% on the individual, and the state's only helping with 25% of it. And that's why so many Michigan people are priced out of an education that they need to be successful. Right now, there are jobs to be filled in the trades where you can make a good living, where you can take care of your family, where you can afford to retire, and even be your own boss. But people don't even know about apprenticeships, much less are there enough available. We took, I don't know how many of you ever took shop. I did. We called it home repair where I was in Grand Rapids. I actually got kicked out of typing. That's how I got into that class. I did.
I appreciate that, but again, you know, whenever people start talking about taxes, which is the way government gets revenue, right? Republicans have people convinced that, you know, it's the everyday person who's going to have their, you know, they're trying to make ends meet, but now they're going to be burdened with extra taxes. Okay? The money, I believe, is out there. It's hidden, it's banked by big corporations. Okay? And every time you try to extract that, okay, Republicans talk about how unfair that is and how anti-competitive that is. And you've got things like, what is it, in Wisconsin, where you just make this great deal to bring in Foxconn, and basically, you know, the population is paying
them
to have
25 years.
25 years, right? It's not a good deal.
Right.
Okay? So people have to, you know, be shown, it has to be explained.
Right.
When we're talking about taxes, we're not talking about, you know, taxing the person that's making $30,000, $40,000 a year. Okay, we're talking about, you know, this transfer of wealth. Okay, and getting it back so we can support our public schools, because in my opinion, public schools have been the most important, you know, driver of progress in our nation. Okay, it's driven everything that we've achieved today. Okay, and you know, so I need to know. I'd like to know, you know, what's the tax policy going to look like? How are you, you know, expecting to get the things for the public schools, for the infrastructure? And, you know, because we can't, it's like the old joke, right? You buy cookies, the businessman comes and takes them, and then says to one guy, you know, says, hey, the union guy wants your cookie.
Right. Right. Well, you're making an important point. And here's how I look at it. I am going to be putting out some really aggressive, exciting policies, but I'm going to be doing it in a way that I identify ways to pay for them, frankly. When I was in the Senate, I authored the Michigan 2020 plan, which would have created the Kalamazoo Promise for everyone across the state. And I paid for it by eliminating corporate loopholes. In our budget, so we have about a $50 billion a year budget in the state of Michigan. Those are expenses that we look at every single year, like what we spend on our schools, what we spend on Medicaid expansion, you know, all the different things that we spend money on. They get scrutinized every single year. But there's another side of the budget called expenditures, which is they're corporate policies that are dollars that we don't collect every year, that have been written in stone into our tax policy that never get scrutinized, that never get defended, that never get debated. Does it make sense to give this particular business a break anymore? Does it create jobs? Does it serve some sort of an important public policy that never gets scrutinized? If we found 5% savings there, we could fund full 4-year college for every person in Michigan. That's 5% savings of what we give away every year we choose not to collect. That's spending. When you choose not to collect someone's taxes, that's spending. And that's never scrutinized. And so, to your point about you think that there are ways to do it, I think you're right. And that is one option of doing it that I put on the table when I was trying to fund my university plan. So I think that we have to get back to a point where we're talking about our tax code and we really are scrutinizing, do these giveaways make sense? Do they yield jobs? Do they invest in Michigan? And if not, they don't deserve special treatment under the law. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep doing that. She's in charge.
I just wanted to say, it seems like we've reached a point in our country where polarization has become so extreme, it feels like the country is splintering apart. And there are two sides, fundamentally, that have different visions and versions of reality. One is based on facts, and the other is much, much, much less factual and kind of fueled by nostalgia and racism, prejudice, and fantasy to some extent, leaving the other side extremely vulnerable to manipulation, I think. But I think people are becoming very fearful that we are headed in our country toward some kind of cataclysmic clash. So I wanted to ask you, what kind of leadership at a national, statewide, and local level do you think is required to steer us away from that, to avoid that?
Whew. You know, I got away from CNN for about 3 hours today. And then my sister was just catching me up as I was walking in on the phone, and it's incredible the pace at which this environment is moving and the ugliness that is attached to it, and the vitriol that is, I'm so fearful, will become commonplace in our discourse. That's a part of why I talk about my background with my dad and my mom, and I think about leaders who really were statespeople, who were focused on solving problems, and their allegiance to Michigan was more important than their allegiance to a political party, and that this country is founded on some robust debate, the tough discussion about ideas and ideals and who we are and what our future is and our aspirations. But this environment we're in right now is, you know, nothing reminiscent of the tough debates that have always kind of been a hallmark of our democracy in America. I'm very concerned about it. I see what's happening, you know, in the prosecutor's office, even during the election, and right after the election. And I know currently it's gotten worse. The discourse that's happening just even in our public schools, where you've got kids that are just repeating things they're hearing at home or from the television that's on 24 hours a day. And so what's the answer? I think the answer is that we demand people who behave better. We demand that the discourse is one that is respectful, even if it's tough, even if it's, you know, a knockdown, drag-out argument, that it is worthy of the kind of democracy that we have had in this country. To elect leaders who model the behavior we want and expect to see. You know, I think about Barack Obama, and if he had been accused of doing 1% of the things this president has done, they would have run him out of Washington, D.C. You know, and I think about the grace and the with which he and his whole family conducted themselves, and you can't compare where we are now to where we were 8 months ago. And I'm very worried about it too. So you tell me, what do you think the answer is? How can I be a part of that change and demanding better?
I think through your example, as you pointed out, I don't know, I'm kind of befuddled by it because it's hard to penetrate the perception that the majority of people on the other side of those two sides carry with them, and I don't know whether we have to reach a calamity point and then get beyond it to get through. So I like your answer.
Well, I'm trying, and if you have ideas for me, I want them.
Transparency.
Yes.
Diversity in your advisors.
Yes.
Speak louder or as loud as the other side. You have something to say. You have something to say that's worthwhile to everybody in this state. From what I've heard so far, I'm enthused. If somehow you can speak as loud as as the minority who elected Donald Trump and that group, if you can, Rob, same to you, if you can speak as loud as them, media, whatever it takes, you have something to say that people will finally go, oh, yeah, maybe a Democrat, maybe I'll vote
And
for a Democrat.
so volume, transparency, diversity, but also, let's,
You've got to speak for the people in Muskegon Heights. You've got to speak for the people.
You are.
Yep.
You've got to speak for the people that aren't being heard, and that's what's going to set you apart. And that's where those non-voters are going to come from.
Right, right. Well, you're absolutely right, and I think that as I get around the state and as I participate in, you know, whether it's science march or tax march or healthcare march or women's march or pipeline. I haven't been to one of those yet. Tomorrow there's one, okay.
Yes.
But you know, that we really have to see this movement and make it intersectional, make it so we are showing up for one another's fights.
Yes.
That it's important for me as a straight white woman to show up for a pride march, as it is for my, you know, all men to show up for the women's march, you know, and that's how I think we.
I heard you speak in Lansing on the steps of the Capitol, and that's the part that I remembered your name from, because you weren't just speaking for women that look like you. You were speaking for all of us, all those different groups, and that's why I'm here to hear you speak now. But that's going to be one of your big jobs. It's going to be getting all these groups that are lost back to the polling place.
On this topic, we need help from you to talk to our neighbors. Our neighbors voted for Trump. My neighbors voted for Trump. Okay? And they're getting disinformation, they're getting a bunch of crap.
Right.
And I need help with that. I want help with that. What do you say to these people? What do you say to the person next to you?
You're asking a really important question, and when I was speaking at the Women's March, you probably remember one of the things that I said was I think it's really important that we don't just vilify our neighbors and friends who didn't show up or who voted for Donald Trump. I think a lot of people in Michigan cast that vote because they were in such pain that they thought the person, well, police, like anything they saw before, might change things. And when you're in pain, any change might be positive. I know some of them are still with him, I know, but to see
I don't
to
think it's that
understand.
noble.